Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Welcome back to Houselights, where we are going to be opening up another house, a whole wing, however we label these things here on this show, with a look at the director Edward Zwick in a very specific way. And we'll be getting to that way in just a moment. I'm one of your hosts, John Mills. Joining me today as we kick off the House of Zwick with a look at 1989's Glory, starring Matthew Broderick, Denzel Washington, Morgan Freeman, Andre Braugher, Cary Elwes, and lots of other people. Joining me is Commander Tristan Riddell, Colonel Darren Moser. Gentlemen, are you ready to charge into battle and discuss this film?
Do I know which one is more higher rank? I don't really. And if it's not Star Trek ranks, it's really hard for me to rank.
I was going to say, they didn't have commanders in the... in the 54th.
No, they didn't. And, honestly, I don't care, because what does it matter anyway? You all are from different branches. There were many different services serving during the war. So there you go. And, of course, we are, like I said, we're looking at this film, Glory, from 1989, and it's to open up the House of Zwick. Edward Zwick, who, as we approach his works, we decided we'll take a quick sort of moment here to talk about him. And I would say, and I'll put this right out on the floor, I would say that Edward Zwick is sort of a quiet, major part of American cinema over the last 40 years. His name never comes up the way that Ridley Scott does, or the way that James Cameron does, or the way that George Lucas does, or any of a number of other names that you'll drop in the history of film. But I would say that Zwick has been incredibly influential in shaping American cinema in specific over the last several decades. Just to name a few of the films that he's been involved with, not necessarily all directorial, but that he's been involved with. He's been involved with Shakespeare in Love. He was involved with Traffic, which I think was the next year or something like that, as a producer. He was involved not just with Glory, but The Last Samurai, Blood Diamond. He was involved with Legends of the Fall, which was starring the still dreamy Brad Pitt before he cut his hair, and all of these other films that he has had in his oeuvre, if you will. And gentlemen, I want to put it out to you first, Darren. Edward Zwick, is he a director that you find yourself referring to with any sort of frequency? Is he a name that comes up for you, or is he sort of like a forgotten piece of lore?
I'd say he's up there with McTiernan as far as, I know his work once you see it, but I would never be organizing my collection by Zwick. Like, my brain doesn't go there. But yeah, we have things like The Siege, Courage Under Fire. I feel like between Tony Scott and Zwick, like, they were just monopolizing Denzel Washington's time for like a couple decades there. He's definitely, they really like him.
Fair. Yeah, he sort of bounced back and forth.
The secret basement of Denzel Washington, connecting all the houses.
Yeah.
But yeah, so no, definitely not like, a known name in my house, but like many directors, you look at their lineup, and I mean, he's an award winner. He's always trying something different. So it's going to be a lot of fun doing this decade by decade slice of his filmography.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned decade by decade, Darren, because with somebody like Zwick, it can be a little bit difficult to do sort of like the full breadth of his work sort of thing. And it is good to get a glimpse of where, check in with an artist through time. How have they developed? How have they changed? Have they changed? Did they need to change? Is there any sort of refinement, or is there something just inimitable about their style where they are a constant? So Tristan, he's also done a lot of work, producing TV shows and stuff like that. 30 something and My So-Called Life were very important in the 1990s. And did you watch either one of those shows at any point? Were your parents watching them? Or
No, not at all. Not at all. my parents are actually Zwick film fans.
Oh, really?
Like they're big Zwick fans, and it was actually kind of funny because I told them that I was that we were doing House of Zwick. I said I was like, hey, we're going to be talking about his movies and going, like picking one movie per decade. And they're like, are you going to do The Great Wall, which is one of their favorite movies of all time? And I said, no, we're not going to do The Great Wall. He didn't direct that one. They're like, that's stupid. And you should do The Great Wall.
Well, actually, that's what's interesting is because, as a producer, he has a lot of influence. As a director, we'll see how much influence he has, what type of mark he left. But we're going in with Glory, which is undeniably a big, dramatic, epic work. And I would say that Zwick, as you go through his filmography, all the stuff we were calling out, a lot of it's action or drama. But his first work was About Last Night, which is a comedy. And I will always find that very interesting that somebody breaks in with a comedy and then it is like an unbroken streak of dramatic work after that. There's not a whole lot of chuckling going on in Glory, I would say. There are moments where, you have humanizing lightness because you need to give a break to the audience and that sort of thing. But coming into this, Darren, I know that you and I both have seen Glory before. I, of course, being the old man, I have memories of Glory that are decades old at this point. But when was the first time you encountered Glory?
This was, I want to say either a Blockbuster or a film school one, because it's a really well done film, especially when you're learning about history. Okay. Just soapbox for 2 seconds. I think anyone who wants to go see this Civil War movie should just watch Glory instead. Problem solved. You're going to learn a lot more and just have a better time. But
well, yeah, I mean, Glory is interesting because it's definitely one of those films where history becomes what the film's version of history was. It's very. For sure. So, but that sort of goes all the way back to Shakespeare, where it's like, what we think happened with Julius Caesar is what we think of in the play. And it's like, that wasn't really historically accurate, everybody, but okay, we'll just go with that one. But Tristan, I know this was your first time watching Glory. And right? Am I correct? This is your first time? Okay. So first question, of course, was this just a sin of omission where you just always meant to get around to it? And two, going into it, did you know the whole thing back and forth because of references, or were you going in completely cold?
I was going in completely cold. I knew nothing about this movie. I mean, I knew it existed, mainly just from the poster. Like, I remember one time when I was, I think, probably 12, a cousin of mine got it for Christmas. And he said, he's like, yeah, this is like one of my favorite films of all time. Like, you need to watch this. And I was like, I'm totally going to do that. I'm totally going to get around to do that. And here I am pushing 40. And, I just now did it. So, hey, I did it. I wasn't a liar. But yeah, no, all I knew about it was from the poster. I was just like, oh, cool. Matthew Broderick, Denzel, Morgan Freeman, boom, Civil War.
Now, did you know that it had won as many awards as it had? Like, did you know how celebrated it was? Right? No.
Okay. Knew nothing about it. Didn't know it was celebrated. Didn't know it was. I looked up the Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes and TMB scores and everything like that, and it was through the roof. And I was like, wow, this movie is respected.
What is stunning to me about it is, in a sense, they chose the wrong year to release it, because 89 was sort of a crowded year for some really notable films. Of course, Batman comes out in 1989 and sort of like sucks all of the oxygen out of the room. Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade comes out. You have a couple of different franchise things. And I think, and Darren, correct me if I'm wrong, or just let me know if you disagree. I think that Glory is one of those films that gets sort of forgotten in the conversation about 1989 at this point, where a lot of people remember everything that came out in 1989, and then you say, and Glory, and they go, oh yeah, right, that came out too.
Yeah, Glory, the vibe I get from Glory is like a VHS copy at your local library in the video section. That's where I see Glory. That's where I would come across it, is like, oh yeah, this historical film. Like, I want to learn about this. It's under sea for Civil War, Yeah. No, and I mean, Glory had a soft open in December of '89, but I think it didn't open wide in America until like February the next year. So it took a little while to get going, but I could totally see this. Obviously they were lining it up for the Christmas release for like, hey, families are going to be off and they want to be able to watch, a movie together, maybe, teening up. It is rated, I'm going to say PG-13.
I thought it was R.
It's probably R. It's got a lot of blood.
I'm double checking right now.
I'd be surprised if it was an R. Then I think about it, but
yeah, I'm pretty sure it was, but I'll double check.
Yeah,
not
I
for
think
swearing,
a guy's head exploded.
Yeah, there's also some language in it that it's a little. It's sort of R territory.
True.
Definitely R territory.
But yeah,
as in the letter R,
yes,
not O-U-R.
Correct, or A-R-E. That's correct. Not R. No, you spelled hour, but that's okay. Go on, Derek. Go on.
But yes, no, I think, this is kind of, I think it should be on more people's shelves that they can, it's a really, not to get into ratings and stuff, but it's a really well told story. And there's a lot of emotional moments. Like, we kind of were chuckling about James Horner earlier, but he knows when to drop that beat. And, and we all know Denzel won for that single tear. Like,
I would say that Denzel, that's the scene that everybody plays when, and I remember actually at the awards show, they played that scene.
That's totally what they would have played. Yeah.
That is absolutely what they played. But I go back mentally to it, and I rewatching it this time, there are so many moments where it really is a whole performance that he gives.
Is probably my favorite of his scenes, where he's determining his new family. I like, again, like the single tier is the single caption you can easily like put on a poster, tell people about, like, it's a single image, exactly what's going on, versus standing around the campfire praying about the fight the next day. Like, you can't communicate that in a single image. So
absolutely. Now, Tristan, given all of the esteem that this film carries with it, box office wise, it didn't exactly tear it up. It cost $18 million to make. It made $27 million. So it winds up being just not being dismissive here, but by saying but it's a prestige picture after a certain point.
A critical success.
However, it is well regarded in the circle of friends I had back then going forward. So everybody I've ever known that encountered it, carries it forward. Do you think that this is a film where it didn't find an audience in the theater and then home video is what sustains it, basically? Is this a film that was never going to find that big success in the theater?
As someone who knew nothing about this film until a couple days ago, I have no idea how to answer that question.
Well, having watched the film, do you think that this is the type of film that was just destined to have trouble finding an audience back then?
Okay. With that with that question,
same question I asked, but just restated.
No, it's worded better, but that's okay. It was more direct.
Well, I know. I had to condense it for you. You've made this complaint before. I get it. This looks and feels like the type of film that should have been a critical success as it was, and if not a boom, but at least a moderate success. Like, it is surprising that it didn't make its money back, that it didn't double its budget. That is surprising to me, because this has, in a non-derogatory way, Oscar bait written all over it. It's just like this is a prestige pick. Like, this is, everybody knows what they're doing. Like, Zwick knew what he was doing. Broderick, Washington, Freeman, they all knew that they were making something powerful. I mean, when you start off with a story this real and this important to our actual history and put it on film, like, that you're making something pivotal. And so to that, I find confusing and surprising. So given that all of the things that you're talking about, it's written by Kevin, it's either pronounced Jar or Jarre. I think it's Jar, Jarre. who also went on to write Tombstone, which is one of my favorite films of all time. And obviously the guy is a big history buff and everything, but speaking to, what you're addressing about it, do you think that the script, the basis for everything from which this sprang, was there anything about it that you look at it in certain exchanges, you say, yeah, that's why this movie, why somebody read this script and they were like, this is what I'm going to make? Like, is there anything intrinsically about the structure of this film that you think that script is, you can trace it back to that seed? Is there anything that jumps out at you?
I don't think it's specifically the script that really jumps out at me where I'm just like, yeah, this is the one. Like there's sometimes like when you see a scene and you're like, oh, that was totally that person's audition piece. Like that kind of thing can jump out at you. You're just like, oh yeah, he this one is the one that he read in front of the casting director. Okay. I don't think there was too many scenes like that. Maybe some of the scenes with Andre Braugher, which by the way, I'm going to tip my hand on this a little bit, where since we're talking about the script, I think this was the wrong perspective to tell this movie. I don't think this should have been told through the eyes of Broderick. It should not have been told through him. It should have been told through Andre Braugher's character. I think he should have been the protagonist. As I was watching it the entire time, I was like, why are we focusing on Broderick? Why are we doing this? It totally should have been Braugher that the camera stayed with, and we saw everything from his perspective.
Interesting perspective. Darren, I'll toss that over to you. When you look at this, do you think that they felt obliged because the one actual real historical figure that appears in the film is Broderick's character?
Yeah.
Do you think they felt obliged in order to give it that air of authentic history to tell it through Broderick's character? Or did they need to divorce themselves from that and do what Tristan is talking about?
No, I definitely see Tristan's point of view, and I love Bauer's performance in this. I haven't seen him in many things besides, like, I know him from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, so it was like, oh, it's young Captain Holt.
My wife didn't even recognize him.
He looks very, very young.
And like I made that the comment that I just made to you guys, like when the credits rolled, I said to her, I was like, this totally should have been through Andre Braugher's perspective. And she's like, wait, he was in this?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's one of those, you're getting early enough in these people's careers where like they almost start to not look like themselves because we're so used to what they look like now. I could see that perspective. But I also, I totally agree with John where they probably just went with, I think they had letters, I'm assuming, because he's writing letters. Like that's the framing device, because of for the historical account. Honestly, I feel if this was like an 2005 movie, totally would have been a different perspective. I've not to remember too much, but 89 was not like, you did not have massive black-led casts that were like running the headliners back then. That came a little later. I mean, not that you didn't have movies like that, but not a movie like this. And it's an interesting, because obviously Shaw is a protagonist, but it's like the main we have one main protagonist and like a dozen little sub protagonists. It's a really interesting formula because we spent it's really interesting watching Denzel in this because it feels like a minor role. Like I know he's like second billing in this, but as far as like what is I feel like Thomas has way more to do. I feel like Morgan Freeman has way more to do. It's really interesting. This kind of like everybody else had to share the secondary character title and like split it amongst themselves. Like that's just, it's a vibe. It's a really interesting vibe in this movie.
I think that, my read of the film is that if there's a flaw, is that it stems from the strength you're talking about, Darren. It's I guess paradoxical or whatever. Like my view is kind of weird where they establish in the opening credits this is based on the letters from this real historical figure. And they take time at certain points to have him narrate those letters that he's sending back. But then it steps away from that and gives more emphasis to Morgan Freeman and Andre Braugher and Denzel Washington. And I think that's where it's sort of like it's fighting for its own focus in a sense, because there's almost a sense from my perspective that maybe somewhere along the way in the editing booth, or maybe while they're filming it, they suddenly realize Broderick isn't carrying this the way that they had intended when they wrote it. And instead they wind up getting these other fantastic performances, and they basically make the call, let's lean into that. Because I would also argue that the fact that this is an historical epic and it's only 2 hours and change, a movie like this, where you're like, oh, well, today it'd be, a different vote. Yeah, today would also be 3.5 hours long, and
or
this
a miniseries.
Yeah, but this
apparently
this
they
is
shot
a
that
really
much.
Tightly focused film. Oh, I'm sure they did.
Like there was a lot more of Carrie Elwes on the cutting room floor, and Jane Alexander, and I think this is a very, very tight presentation of
like
it.
The only female in this entire movie. Like, there are no women in this movie, basically.
Well, I mean, back then only men served in the military, so it's like,
well, true. We got a couple passing glances, and that was it. Like, I'm like, is that the supposed love interest that he would return to if he lived? ? I don't know.
I think that given that though, Tristan, do you think that this is a film that should have had more runtime to it anyway? Because it's not like 3 hour
Tristan,
epics.
He doesn't
didn't
like
exist
adding
back
runtime. If anything, it's the reverse.
True.
I actually, I'm going to go against the grain here and go against pattern and say that, like, I think this would have benefited from more runtime. I do. I think this was an interesting format to me. Like, this was an interesting structure, because there were certain times when I'm like, oh, we're still here. Oh, we're still doing this. Okay, we still haven't gotten shoes yet. All right. I was like, man, like, we're spending a lot of time here at the camp. And then, like, as we were getting forward and they were on the beach going towards the final battle, I didn't check to see how much time was left at first, but I was kind of asking myself, I was like, I looked at my wife and I was like, is this going to end in like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid?
Left at the very, like, once they're on the beach, it's almost over.
Yeah, that's what I was feeling. That's what I was thinking. Like, I was just like, man, is this going to end like, like Sundance, where they all just kind of like storm the castle and then freeze frame credits, they all died. But then I saw that we had 20 minutes left. I was like, okay, well, we're going to actually see them die. So yeah, the format to me was odd. I feel like this movie needed more breathing room. Like, if you're going to focus so much on the beginnings of things and on the training of it, I feel like you needed to spend more time of them, out in the field. And I know that was a plot point. I understand that. I understand it was a plot point that they weren't seeing action, and that they needed to get through it. They needed their shot. They needed to prove themselves. But I feel like there needed to be more post training camp.
I understand that point. Darren, do you agree with what Tristan is saying there?
It's not that I don't agree. I think to a point it doesn't matter. Like, I'm not going to ding it for the scale should have been a little more training camp or a little more battle at the end, because at the end of the day, they made me care about these characters. So whatever formula they came up with and however they told that story, by the end, like, I knew every single one of those main leads, and I cared if they made it through that final battle. And at the end of the day, that's what you want out of a war movie, is you want that investment. And I think, I think you're right, John, like what you said earlier, where, I mean, I think the thing Matthew Broderick does best in this is his youth. Is it, you totally get this vibe of like, yeah, this is like some 20-something, not a career military man that's pressed into service. Like, he does that well. But on the flip side of that, he's not the giant leading man. So you have to pad it out with the other stories. But yeah, I love the arc we got with him, though. I liked his shell shock at the beginning, and that led into Like that scene where the guy's a pretty good shot with a rifle. He's like, yeah, try to do it and reload while I'm blasting this gun by your ear. Like, this is what it's going to be like. So yeah, but at the end of the day, it made me care about these characters and their story. And that's all you need to do.
Well, where I would give it credit is that with the structure, with the way they, that Zwick approaches it, it's really easy. And I think we've seen this plenty of times with a film like this, to get overly sentimental to the point of maudlin and dwell on it. Whereas this very much feels more authentic to me because it has that air of the very stiff social interaction rules of back then, right? There's not anything grafted onto it from the 20th century of trying to bring on, oh, well, this is how people act, and so we're going to make them more relatable. There's a stiffness and a sort of like a distance that we expect from stories of this time, where people aren't the same sort of, there's not the same level of openness. And so I think whether they stumble into that accidentally or not, that's my matter of gray area. But I wind up enjoying the film specifically because it doesn't dwell, and because it has restraint. Basically, it doesn't feel manipulative the way that, say, Oliver Stone in Platoon is. Right there's a little bit of a little bit of distance from the directing, which I think works to its benefit. But is it also possible, because we've already referenced the music, Tristan? Do you think that the score does a lot of the emotional heavy lifting in this film? Is this something where it's like a John Williams situation, where it's like, if this score wasn't this score, it doesn't play the same way?
Well, every time I watch Apollo 13, a tear, rolls down my cheek, yeah. And every time I watch Titanic, I get choked up. Yeah. So, wait, this film, Glory. Yeah, I think there's with a Horner score, it's very in your face, and it's very out there. Like I just got done watching Dune Part 2, and Zimmer's score in that one, like, there's a lot of moments that would probably land flat if it wasn't for Zimmer poking you in the ears every once in a while. And I feel like Horner kind of does that too with this one, where you're like, he tells you how to feel. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing or even a good thing. It's just how it is. It's like Horner is very much is not a subtle composer.
True. That is a very good way to say it.
I mean, like you were saying about Apollo 13, like, I can think of specific tracks from Apollo 13 that you could literally cut into this movie and it would almost be better. Like, there's some great horns. There's some great, like, I mean, just a tick better. Like, not like it has to outdo it, but yeah. And that's Horner. That's not a surprise. But yeah, I mean, but again, at the end of the day, it hit me when it needed to hit me in those moments, because the score was like accenting that moment or making me think about, these people as men, as heroes, as going down into battle. And that's just the point of the movie.
In terms of battle, it's difficult to shoot and edit a battle sequence, especially when you're dealing with something that's close quarters or something that is reenacting, historical fighting styles and stuff like that, and make it understandable visually and even, audially for an audience. Tristan, in terms of the battle and how Zwick treats the battle, the way he films and has his editor put it together, is it successful in terms of, conveying the tension and the fear and the stress, but at the same time retaining enough clarity that everything that's going on, who's getting hit, where people are in position to each other? Does it retain its sense of place and distance and character throughout the battle scenes?
In terms of the editing with the battle scenes, I felt like it did its job. I felt like it was something that, like, it wasn't it wasn't overly fancy. Like it didn't try to manipulate you with a lot of fast cuts or a lot of, craziness around. Like it kind of lets you soak it in, which is something that I really appreciate. That is which is kind of lost in modern films and also in the early aughts too. Like, there was a lot of fast cutting that was just like, it was manipulated, kinetic editing that tried to confuse you and make you feel like something was amped up when it wasn't. And this one let you see what was going on. Geographically, I think it did a really good job. That was something that we've all been talking about the past couple of weeks, about how there's certain times when like Tony Scott didn't really let you know where you were and you just kind of had to take it on faith. I feel like Zwick lets you know where you are. And there was a few times when it almost felt a little limiting with how much he let you know where you were, where like the sacking of that small town. You're like, oh, we're getting one angle of this town because they built 3 structures and that's all you're going to be able to see. It's one of those things. And I felt like that kind of happened in a few places where you're like, okay, we have enough money to build this facade, and this facade. Keep the camera here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the fort at the end, like it never felt like a fort. It felt like a berm, and they're on the other side of it. Like, and like you said, the town, like, I'm like, town? You mean, the governor's mansion and maybe his stable next door? Because that's all we saw. But, I got the point across. But yeah, it was...
Right, and that's the thing. It's just like, it's a movie.
Lots of trees. Anywhere it can be trees, but when you have an actual location, then you have to start to think about it.
Economics is a real thing. It's not like they were doing it on the cheap. They're just doing with, what they could with what they had.
I mean, they could just CGI the town, make it bigger, wall extensions.
Yeah, why not? Just have they not heard of set extensions? I can do that in my After Effects right now. Jeez.
Here as the Abyss, the technology was not there, not there at all yet.
Not really. Maybe a matte painting or two. They could have thrown those in, but in terms of those battles, they also had a large deal of Civil War reenactors who actually worked for free, just for the pleasure of being in the film. And Darren, was there any sense when you were watching this that you were watching a bunch of non-SAG card carrying Civil War reenactors who did this stuff for fun, or did this still play as a professional production full of extras for you?
I mean, until you mentioned it, I didn't even give 2 thoughts about like where all the people came from or where they got all the people to play the army. I was so focused on our group, and then it's like, as long as, again, we were joking about he identified where we were. It's a very clear movie. You know who your guys are. They're the guys in blue. Even when there's the other colored regiment, they all have red pants, and you can totally identify the other group. You can identify the South. You can it's very, very clear. It's never like, now, wait a minute, who's shooting at who and who's going to the left? Lots of smoke, lots of like through the trees and the, guerrilla forest warfare. But yeah, I can just imagine you're a Civil War reenactor and you're like, well, your time is nigh because we're making glory and we need you and all your stuff to come on out.
All I was actually thinking about when I started the movie. I was just like, man, that every single Civil War reenactor who was in driving distance it came to this thing.
Well, imagine also, you want to talk about budget. All of these guys already got their costumes.
Did you want me to bring my horse? I brought 30 horses. I just thought it was the shooting day. We got horses if you need them.
But seriously, all of those guys had their own costumes already. And they were all fitted and they all worked and they were all period accurate. Like, talk about...
Like they did a 501st or something.
Or
basically,
like the parade. I think of that scene. Like that's a kind of a harder scene because everybody in that town square and lining, they all have to be in costume. Just bring them all out.
Yeah. The thing that I like that they, at the end, they have sort of that press gallery that's watching the action go on. And I think it's actually a wonderfully played scene when Broderick hands the letters over and he's like, if I fall, and like, tell them what you saw here. Like, it will always bend my mind that there was at any point, any war where there could be a press gallery. And they weren't like freaking out. It wasn't like they were like embedded with troops.
We're totally
anywhere.
safe. Just a 5-minute jaunt up the beach and they can't get to us.
It absolutely blows my mind.
I remember learning about that in school.
Yeah.
Where like it was like 5th grade or something like that, where my teacher said like, yeah, some people would have picnics on a hill overlooking the battle. And I'm like, friggin' what?
Because who's going to waste a cannon shot that way? When all the bad guys are that way.
Well, there's also the fact that, this is why television is such a good thing, because it gave somebody something to watch that wasn't, it was pretend horrific instead of real horrific.
And also, who wants to see that? Oh my God.
Well, keep in mind, we're not too far away from, people attending public hangings and stuff like that. And
that's true, man.
It's not that far off.
It's the news people. Like they have papers to fill. If the war is big news, like
that I get.
Oh, you're talking about like Joe Sunday and his family picnicking on Gettysburg Hill. Like, that's.
Oh, we're going to go to church in the morning, and then we're going to pack a picnic lunch, and we're going to go sit on a hill and watch people shoot each other. That's the real mind bender, right? But there.
Although you know what, if anything defines America at war, that does. Just, we're in the middle
I was
of the
gonna make it
War,
broader.
but you know what? We're going to just picnic with the Joneses while we wait for this conflict to, like, that tracks.
I was going to say, this is the same species that has the Colosseum, that had the witch trials, and everything like that. So,
gladiator games. They use, you read in British history about people showing up to watch people get drawn and quartered. Like, what? It's mind numbing, but at the same time, we're still not that far removed from it. So it's like, it's really a bizarre sort of perspective, but
speaking of ridiculous humans, one thing that I do kind of want to talk about is the crux of this film, the crux of the story, and something that I know like is obvious, but still like such a freaking head scratcher from a modern audience. I guess maybe I shouldn't expound too much as a modern audience, but is that, like the North and South are fighting because of slavery, because of, like the South wants to break free in order to keep enslaving other humans. And the idea of black people, free black people, fighting for that cause is a novelty. And they still get disrespect from Northern soldiers.
Yeah.
It's insane. It's crazy, but it's not, because it's so common, it's so expected. But at the same time, you're like these people are fighting for their own freedom. You are fighting for their freedom, but you still don't give them the respect you don't give them the same respect as white citizens. And as they illustrated with their reduced pay. And I'm laughing because of the absurdity, not because it's funny. It's just absurd to me.
Yeah, it is. There's no two ways about that. And I think it's a good thing on the part of the film to call attention to something specific like that, because you don't even think that gets to how, even at the bureaucratic level, how it goes. But in terms of the historicity, the real regiment, apparently they did not accept freed slaves. It was because they wanted it to be an elite unit. And so some of the story arcs here are sort of invented whole cloth. The regiment would have been much more like the Andre Braugher character as a whole than this mash of people. Now, obviously,
I shoot squirrels good, and I
can't read. Like, obviously, though, you're telling this epic story that's, everybody understands or used to understand that film wasn't necessarily real history. But Darren, in terms of the historicity, do you think that there is, do you think that Glory is one of those movies that escapes it because it's good? Or do you think it's something where it does too good a job of establishing the reality of things with the bookended blocks of text on the screen? Do you think it sells too well the idea that this is actual history? Like, it leans into it even more than maybe even Oliver Stone does with JFK.
I get what you're saying. I think you already kind of answered it, where back then, like in the late 80s and previous, not that it's that different now, but like it was just not as, we weren't as focused on, oh, this is actual historical events. This is actual, like, yeah, obviously there was a 54. There was, General Shaw. There was the battle for the fort. But, many of these individual characters, like how many times have movies combined 2 or 3 historical people into one character to simplify the cast? Like, that was very common to do. And so, yeah, I don't feel like it's too off the mark.
Good. I mean, I can honestly say that I agree with that. I think that it's just an odd thing that it clouds things. But Tristan, same question to you. Do you think that the film was obliged in any way to say inspired, like have that disclaimer that we had last week with Unstoppable, inspired by true events?
I kept thinking that same thing, like glory, inspired by true. Like, why would you put that at the front? Like, it's so obvious it's a historical movie, but
yeah. I think because it is in a historical period, like because it is a Civil War film, and because this is something that actually happened, because the 54th existed, because the Colonel existed, because people like this existed. Like, I think it's enough of a reality. Like, these are the things that they went through. Like, there was the pay, there was the pay issue, there was the boot issues, there was the uniform issues, there was like, it was the final battle happened when it happened. Like, even the Colonel releasing his horse at the end, like, that actually happened. I feel like there's enough real things that happen where you don't have to say based upon, inspired by. There's enough there.
Okay.
But regardless, we all need to take every single movie, even if it says based on true events or inspired by true events, or all of this really happened exactly the way that we show it. Even if they say all of that things, we always need to question, well, it's a movie. So, like, whenever I watch a real life story, I always ask myself, like, at the end when the credits roll, I wonder how much of that is real, and not in a sarcastic way, not even in a sardonic way. I have trained myself for decades to go, I wonder how much of that is real, and then I look it up.
It reminds me of a story. My wife and I, years ago, there was an HBO movie called, I think it was like Warm Springs, where Kenneth Branagh played FDR. And the way they portrayed his marriage to Eleanor Roosevelt was like, it was this hunky-dory, wonderful thing, la-di-da-di-da. And like, I remember at the end of the movie, my wife laughing because I went, are you effing kidding me? She was like, what? I was like, it's not like they went off and lived happily ever after. And I started going through all of these things. And she said that. She's like, yeah, I know it's just a movie. I was like, I know, but right. You're absolutely right. I should just walk away at this point. You're supposed to feel happy when you walk out, and that's great. Yeah, we still make reference to it. But Darren, obviously Denzel Washington gets a lot of credit for his performance in this. Is there another performance in this film where you think it's a standout, that is a beacon of just magnificent acting that Denzel Washington just happens to eclipse, that if he hadn't had this performance, that this person would have been recognized for what they did?
It's really hard because it comes down to screen time, really. Like, there's many great little moments, but they're spread throughout all the other characters. So it's like you got your big number one with Matthew Broderick, you got your number two with Denzel. Even, Carrie is kind of spread amongst all the other characters. Like we said, a lot of him ended up on the cutting room floor. But maybe Andre, I think like we said at the very beginning of this podcast, I think Andre has the most through story. We see him before the regiments formed and after. And I think he lives, right? They infer that we don't see him die. Well, we see him get bayoneted in the back.
Yeah, and he gets carried away, but
we don't see him buried, but it's
I'm pretty sure you didn't really come back from that.
They say, like half of their regiment like died, like, geez. But so I would say that's or even just Morgan Freeman. Like, we laugh of like, oh, Morgan Freeman's in everything, and Morgan Freeman, just carries everything with his voice. But I cared about his character. I loved that he got promoted and he was recognized by the men, and he was kind of that older kind of father figure to them, and it worked really well.
I think that I like that you point to Freeman, because I think that Freeman's interaction with Denzel Washington actually elevates Denzel's performance. It's two
totally.
actors making each other even better. With Andre Braugher, and Tristan, I'll kick it over to you. I mean, like, I agree with Darren that Brower's performance is great. And what I always go back to with him is when he breaks during training and starts sobbing. It's such a real moment that, like, even just talking about it, like, I get sort of like that goosebump sort of thing where it's like, I wanted to step through the screen and comfort him, because this was obviously a guy, I think his identity as a person changes the most outside of Denzel Washington's character. Like, they have a parallel track. And, do you agree that Braugher sort of gets overshadowed by exactly? Do you think that Braugher just gets overshadowed by Denzel in this film, or do you think is there somebody else that jumps out at you?
I think I was surprised to see Brower's name so far down the list. Now I understand that, like, he wasn't a name at that point, but with as much emphasis as they gave him in the movie, I expected his name to be much higher up. But I feel like, Morgan Freeman and Denzel Washington are just absolute powerhouses. I mean, there's a reason why we are still talking about their movies. There's a reason why this is our sixth Denzel movie in a row that we're talking about. We didn't even plan this, folks. We did not plan this, and it just kind of happened. And next week we're doing another Denzel film again.
Well, guess next week, guys, it's coming.
Yes, it's not going to be until The Last Samurai that we're Denzel free.
But wait, true. If you look in the back, right there on the boat. No, I'm just kidding. He's not in that.
And we even came up with an alternate reality where Denzel played Ken Watanabe's character in Last Samurai, and what that would look like.
You came up with that. We did.
Oh, we didn't all do that. I did that. Okay, I did that.
No, you were writing prompts for Dolly or Midjourney.
Midjourney. Oh, yeah. Okay. Now I'm gonna make that happen.
You got to make that happen. I think you're obliged now, honestly. It's what the public wants. And so we will task you with that. As we love to say, round third, and come to the point where I'm going to ask for Final Judgment of Glory from 1989. And because he hates going first, I'm going to toss it to Darren, because I like to see him suffer. So Darren, on a 5-star scale, the most perfect scale ever created for film, where do you land with Glory? And of course, any final thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, no, I feel like we covered a lot of it, and it's definitely not a perfect film without flaws, but for what it is, for the story you tell, I think I kind of said my piece in the beginning of, I can overlook a lot of little things, flow or pacing, or the music really hits you or anything like that. But at the end of the day, I care about these characters. I really care about these characters. I care if they live, if they die. When Shaw goes into the general's office, he's like, give us, put us on the lines. And I'm like, well, hey, buddy, you don't want him to hate you and like send you on a suicide mission. Like, you got to watch out. Like, we gotta take care of your people. Yeah, so I gonna give it a 4. 4 drum beats of the dismissed drummers at the end. A solid movie. And I could totally see. It's interesting. Like, I don't know why I kept thinking of like Schindler's List, just another historical war epic. But this movie, I feel like I would pop in. It's light enough in the camaraderie and the type of story. Like, yeah, it has its blood and guts, and it has its drama, but I don't know, something about the 89s, it's just not as intense. So yeah, four stars from me.
I'll go next because Tristan, this was your first time seeing it, so you'll get to round it out. Darren, I'm going to wind up with you. I think that this is what I would call a solid 4. My memory of it was that I loved it more, but I think that maybe I've changed. Maybe the way I look at things has changed a little bit, but this is a solid 4 because I think that where we have a quote unquote misstep is I think that it does need a little more runtime, specifically because the one character that everything is supposed to revolve around is the one I never really connect with. And I know that this could be a caustic way to say it. I don't want to say it this way, but I think that Broderick is so clearly outmatched, outshone, however you want to say it, by the other performances in the film, that he's there and I want to pay attention to the other people. And I think that is something where Zwick just doesn't get the performance out of Broderick that he needs. I'm not blaming Broderick for it. That's Zwick's responsibility. And I think Broderick is bringing everything he can. And I think he has moments, but he never quite rises to that same level that I get from the other actors. I never want to step through and hug him the way I do Brower. I never want to respectfully listen to his anger the way I do with Denzel Washington. I never want to try to connect with him, even the way that the one guy who learns to read through it. I like that. That's a great performance, a great supporting role that I think gets overlooked in this film sometimes. So yes, solid 4 from me. And so now, Tristan, we come to you. Where do you end on your first viewing of Glory?
I'm kind of teetering between a 3 and a 3.5. I agree with everything that you guys are saying, like John, especially with Matthew Broderick being such a weak link in this film. I'm not saying he did a bad job. He didn't do a bad job at all. But when you're compared to the other people, man, it is rough because they are absolutely bringing it. And at times Broderick looks lost. And I know that that's his character, but I'm not saying it in the realm of his character. Like there's the scene when he goes and he's screwing up the quartermaster's area. Like there needed to be more power behind that. There needed to be more intimidation. And I'm just like, look, it's Matthew Broderick reading lines and, saying that he needs to hit something off of a shelf. And, at the end, I know this is real life and real life is not always satisfying, but there needed to be something more at the end. There needed to be some sort of signal of hope at the end, because at the end, they all die. They're all buried in a mass grave. And then at the end, the title card says, and the
fort was never taken.
The fort was never taken. I'm like, cool. I'm so glad I watched that. And it's just, and it has like a little footnote talking about how like, Lincoln said like he said that
the tide was turned by all of the people of color who enlisted. It was like 180,000. He said that's what turned the tide of the war.
Right. I wish we saw just like a scenelet, just a little scenelet at the end.
Well, even if you're going to invent Andre Braugher's character, which they did, have him, to your point, Darren, we do see him lifted out. So have him in probably like in a wheelchair or something, listening to Lincoln in the background.
Or he becomes the throughput. He's telling the story to the next generation, and he sees like a bunch of colored regiments marching past, like, here they go.
However you want to do it.
Almost like they could have used him as a framing device, or maybe even a protagonist. Like,
maybe if they'd sent him home when he got shot.
Maybe that could have been the movie.
I get it, but yeah.
I think if Broderick was stronger, it wouldn't stand out to you about the framing device. I think, but anyway.
I'm gonna give it a 3.5 because I feel like a 3 is too harsh. So I'm gonna say 3.5. I want to give it a 3, but I'm gonna give it a 3.5.
Well, there you go. That's a 4, and a 3.5. That's pretty close. We don't always align, but we're pretty close on that one. it's not another Unstoppable where I was, flailing out there on the fringes. But this tees us up to jump into the 90s and look at another film from Edward Zwick, also starring Denzel Washington, and about a potentially controversial topic, especially in today's environment. Darren, what is it we're going to be looking at next week in the House of Zwick?
Yeah, next we're going to be jumping, I think, a good 8-9 years to 1998, The Siege, here on Houselights.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.